We learn yet more regarding these spiritual predators and the parasitic techniques they employ from the Nag Hammadi Library's authoritative teaching. It reads, quote, "For man-eaters will seize us and swallow us, rejoicing like a fisherman casting a hook into the water. For he casts many kinds of food into the water, because each one of the fish has his own food. He smells it and pursues its odor, but when he eats it, the hook hidden within the food seizes him and brings him up by force out of the deep waters. No man is able then to catch that fish down in the deep waters, except for the trap that the fisherman sets. By the ruse of food he brought the fish up on the hook. In this very way we exist in this world like fish. The adversary spies on us, lying in wait for us like fishermen, wishing to seize us, rejoicing that he might swallow us. For he places many foods before our eyes, things which belong to this world. He wishes to make us desire one of them, and to taste only a little, so that he may seize us with his hidden poison, and bring us out of freedom and take us into slavery. For whenever he catches us with a single food, it is indeed necessary for us to desire the rest. Finally, then, such things become the food of death." Unquote. The congruence here between the tactics used by such spiritual predators of the fourth density and the tactics used by the human predators of the ruling class is a quite remarkable connection. Whether such occurred via the aforementioned narrative of a dark spiritual communion or by way of other means, such similarity reveals a deeply ironic scenario. For just as the ruling class deceptively exploits the materialistic and egotistical weaknesses of humanity to parasitically prey upon man, so too does this malevolent spiritual consciousness utilize the very same techniques in the exploitation of the ruling class. It is either that the ruling class began as natural spiritual human beings, and due to a dark spiritual bargaining subsequently degraded over time into the inhuman psychopaths they have come to embody, or they were initially conceived altogether differently, and have always exhibited such predatory tendencies, for they were created in error by not the utmost God of creation, but by a lower demigod lacking balance and purity of intention. For insight into this latter possibility, we turn to the Nag Hammadi Library's tripartite tractate, which explains how all human beings are not in fact equal creations. Rather, it explains, there are in actuality 3 different kinds of humans, in a division that is known as the tripartition of mankind. The first type of human is what is known as the hylic man, or the soma-bodied man, a human who is strictly material in nature, as they are utterly bound to matter, are born from matter, and will perish in matter. In essence, a human being born without a soul. As we continue, keep in mind this soulless material man, and how such a human could be equated to a psychopath, as such a soulless vessel lacks the spiritual resonance needed to interface with the feminine-based energies of the heart. The second type of human is the psychic man, who may, to a degree, determine their own destiny. Such a human could be described as a matter-dwelling spirit, as anything that is of spirit is closer to the divine, for such a human has a personal presence in the fourth density. The third category of human is the pneumatic man, with pneuma meaning divine breath. The pneumatic man is a spiritual human being who is pure and of the ineffable spirit. A human who physically incarnates to live a life of witnessing, only then to physically die and immediately return to the original source of creation itself. The tripartite tractate states, quote, "Each of the 3 types was known by its fruit, and they were not known at first, but only at the coming of the Savior, who shone upon the saints and revealed what each was." Unquote. We further this idea by citing the Nag Hammadi Library's tractate on the origin of the world, which states, quote, "For everyone must go to the place from which he has come. Indeed, by his acts and his knowledge, each person will make his own nature known." Unquote. There are indeed beings of the soil, beings of the higher mind, and beings of the ineffable spirit. In this model, have not the ruling class indeed made their nature known as lower beings of the soil? We can perhaps more definitively answer such a question by exploring the macro-creation of the world in itself. we approach the creation of this physical world by examining the mystical philosophy of the Gnostic scholar Valentinus, who postulated the existence of an utmost primal creator being, referring to this being as Bythos. As the initial source of all creation itself, Bythos emanated himself outward into 30 divine creator beings known as aeons, who were each instilled with their own free will and gathered into 15 complementary pairs of male and female, with each divine union known as a syzygy. A lower creator aeon, known as Sophia, lower only in her approximation to the original source, decided to create a being without the male counterpart of her syzygy, a being that was instilled with the divine blueprint of original creation, but was nonetheless erroneously created in disharmony and subject to entropy, as such a creation lacked the divine harmony of male and female unity. This fractured creation was a male being known as the demiurge. There are competing Gnostic theories as to why Sophia decided to create the demiurge in a manner independent of her harmonic syzygy, with some philosophies suggesting that Sophia's passion overcame her as she tried to knowingly create beyond what she was capable. Others contest that her mistake originated from a higher erroneous source by an aeon that then filtered down to Sophia. Nevertheless, when Sophia created the demiurge and subsequently considered the consequences of her willful creation, her self-reflective thought, or epinoia, instantly transformed into the likeness of a lion-faced serpent, and its eyes became like flashes of fire and lightning. In other words, she immediately saw the error of her ways and cast the demiurge into the outer realms of space so that none of her fellow aeons would see what she had done. She had created the demiurge in ignorance and knew what she had created was an error. She tried to conceal him by surrounding him with a luminous cloud, and gave the demiurge his own dominion, or in other words, his own ability to create within that luminous cloud, so that he might keep to himself and never be seen from again. She then called the demiurge Yaldabaoth, Samael, or Saturn, who then used his gifted ability to create this physical world, including the physical bodies of the humans who dwell herein. And so, according to this creational story, it is not God who made our material world, but one of his lower minions. Moreover, this minion erroneously created our world in fractured imbalance, a worldly creation and all the material things that reside herein, by using the original blueprint of creation, but lacking the divine feminine essence, which essentially is an exact representation of the aforementioned nature of the psychopath. This demiurge is the first archon and utmost archon, who then, in ignorant darkness, divided himself out into lower and lower emanations, emanations that represent the different malevolent ultra-terrestrial personalities that stalk, haunt, and prey upon humanity from the fourth density realm, that, as previously elucidated, interface perfectly with the male imbalanced consciousness emanated by the genetic psychopaths of this physical realm, as such soulless humans are the soul creations of the demiurge himself. Sophia saw the wickedness of what her creation had led to, and overcome with sorrow, she descended into darkness. In this darkness she repented and began to weep. The whole of the pleroma, or aeonic realm where the aeons dwell, heard the prayer of her repentance, and they praised on her behalf the original virgin spirit. Her male consort came to her aid down through the pleroma, in order that he might correct her deficiency, and lifted her up from the darkness, yet not back to the pleroma, but just above her creation, in proximity to the mistake she made, so that she might correct her deficiency. And it is her repented essence, rejuvenated by the aid of the male counterpart of her syzygy, that resides as a spiritual presence among the material forms of this earth, emanating forth to spiritually ensoul a portion of humanity, forming the second type of humans, psychic man, who may to a point control their own spiritual destiny. The pneumatic humans are sent forth, as previously stated, to bear witness and then return to source, with certain divine avatars intermittently incarnated to help the spiritual ascendancy of human beings. According to the story, to once again relate such to our primary subject, It is those soulless, material human beings who represent primary psychopaths, as they are the sole creation of the demiurge and are not instilled with the feminine essence of the virginal spirit. We have explored how these psychopaths can commune and interface with the malevolent consciousness of the fourth density, and how the psychopathic elite are used to further this consciousness's dark agenda by ruling over a constructed social hierarchy in order to manufacture low human consciousness to stave off the entropy that such malevolent consciousness is forever subject to in the fourth density realm. This metaphysical explanation does not rule out other intervention theories of human origins, however, as such could simply be a spiritual narrative for what also physically took place. The creation story of ancient Sumer, with that of the Anunnaki, and their genetic manipulation of human DNA could very well be the physical narrative that played out in such a scenario. The archaeological evidence for such, for instance in the infamous elongated and extra-voluminous skulls, as well as the ruling class's obvious mimicry of Sumerian artistic depictions of the gods, including their attire, symbolic archetypes, and rituals, lends credence to the veracity of such a story I will nonetheless leave to other researchers, however. Whatever the nature of humanity's origin, as well as the origin of the psychopathic ruling class, such represents information that can only be transmuted into gnosis on a personal level. For once again, any information in of itself is neutral in value. Information assessed in a critical and intuitive manner becomes knowledge. Knowledge, deeply absorbed and engaged through spiritual insight, becomes wisdom, and the application of this wisdom through a direct, living contact becomes gnosis. Information has simply been provided here to initiate such further explorations in the formulation of one's own holistic analysis of psychopathy, and how this disease of wickedness has come to so readily influence the affairs of this world. Personally, I have directly applied all the information expressed in this presentation to my life, not by believing in such, but by simply holding this information as an idea through time. I have indeed found credence in the ideas put forth, particularly in the tripartition of man and the Gnostic creational myth on the origin of the world. Linking the material, soma-bodied man to psychopathy makes a great deal of sense and feels accurate, as such a soulless being can account for the heartless behavior of the psychopath and their ongoing subjugation of the human species. Viewed from an imbalanced perspective, such information could perhaps seem gloomily disempowering, yet viewed holistically, such becomes the opposite and is indeed quite uplifting. The implications of such a reality actually reveal how truly powerful human beings indeed are, as we have the ability to create our own reality, so long as we harmonize our heart and mind and choose to exercise our own precious, divinely bestowed gift of free will. The biggest secret of the control system is that it requires the willful input of our consciousness to function. By withdrawing our consciousness, and more importantly, withdrawing our consent, the control system falters. As previously stated, mapping negative polarity and illuminating shadow are nonetheless crucially important ventures of the ascendant human journey. It is through our contact with the extreme polarities of earthly living that inspires the evolution of our consciousness. Once we deconstruct the false parameters that have from birth been built around us, we naturally expose ourselves to greater possibilities, revealing the in fact infinite creative potential inherent to each of us. For instilled within every naturally evolving human being is a seed of divine potential, and it is only through personal acts of individual will that each seed can be germinated and fully nourished to bear the fruits of higher, holistic consciousness.